Raft is currently an LSDfi protocol, right? So what we focus on is various types of capital efficient staked ETH collateral, starting with staked ETH and then potentially branching out to different types. But what the protocol was built in mind is not only to cater to these staking derivatives, but also cater to any type of other collateral. So what Raft can be used for actually is through our one-step leverage design is it can be used as a general leverage engine, spot leverage on any sort of volatile asset. So people who want to leverage up on WBTC, if we actually want to add WBTC collateral at a later date, they can actually do so through our system, and it will work very fluently together with other types of collateral. So whether that is an ETH staking derivative or it is some other type of collateral that has enough liquidity on mainnet, so we can actually implement that and then see which way the protocol goes, because we don't want to stop at taking two different kinds of staked ETH collateral, but we also want to branch out potentially into different types in the future. And I think this will be something for the community to decide.
Welcome to the DXDAO podcast.
Welcome to another DXDAO podcast, and in this episode we have David from Raft with us. And Raft is a new LSDfi protocol which leverages staked ETH, and you can basically lend a stable coin against that and get leverage on your staked ETH and get more value out of your staked ETH while it's gathering yields from being staked. And Raft launched a few weeks ago, and it has gotten some decent traction. According to a June dashboard from DeFi Mochi, the TVL is around 48 million. And it's in the third place in terms of market share. So quite fast growth here. And we want to know more about how Raft functions and what actually led to this success. And I have with me Luude, also from DXDAO, who will be co-hosting this episode with me. Hey, Luude.
Hey, how you going? And hey, David, welcome on.
Hey guys, thanks very much for having me.
Shall we kick it off by the basic explainer what Raft is and how it aims to utilize the staked ETH in the DeFi ecosystem?
Sure, I can give a quick introduction. So Raft is on its basic level, it's a collateralized debt protocol. What that means is we take we will take various different forms of capital efficient collateral that you can use to lock, and then you can generate our native stablecoin against that and use that for whatever purposes you would like. The system was designed with leverage in mind. So primary use case is and will be offering DeFi native leverage on these volatile assets in a cheap and efficient way. That's sort of like the gist of it.
That's a quick overview, which leaves a lot of questions about the mechanisms behind it. But I think we could start with like the source of the staked ETH, which of course comes from Lido, and the biggest market participant in the staked ETH market. But
Sure.
Is there a connection with you and Lido that you have established, and they are basically happy with you that you provide further utility for their staked ETH?
Yeah, I think our relationship goes back to sort of like the earlier days that we were working on Tempus, which was a protocol that lets you like basically speculate on your future yield or get a fixed yield on various interest-bearing assets. And we were integrating with staked ETH on that, and we got a grant for that. So like our relationship goes back to quite a long time. That being said, I mean, I think like we've had several conversations with the Lido team about the fact that they actually want to incentivize and generate more use cases for staked ETH right now. Obviously, as withdrawals went live, putting their own incentives on pools such as staked ETH/ETH on Curve doesn't really make that much more sense. It's not actually a priority since withdrawals are live and you can exit out of staked ETH via the withdrawal process. So what they're trying to do is to generate more DeFi native use cases for staked ETH and incentivize those use cases instead of incentivizing the peg between staked ETH and ETH. So this is where we sort of come in and we provide the most capital efficient way to borrow against your staked ETH collateral. The reason for that is that you only pay a fixed borrowing fee upfront, and then you can keep your entire staking yield on your collateral side while you're borrowing your stablecoin. So why that's interesting for a lot of people is you can basically leverage up on your staked ETH this way, and this is one of the primary use cases that Lido is trying to work on with Maker and Aave. And I think at this point, where there's like probably about 2 million staked ETH being deposited to Maker and Aave for the purposes of leveraging up on your staked ETH holdings. And I think this is where we come in, where we provide like a easier, more capital efficient way of doing that. So so just to go back to your question, I think there's a lot of we have a lot of synergies with Lido. So trying to keep that relationship up and going.
Oh, that's excellent to hear. And I think obviously it's in Lido's best interest to foster as much utility for staked ETH as possible. And it's good to hear that you guys have had an ongoing relationship with them since the Tempest days. So with the mechanism of a CDP stablecoin, and you're minting this stablecoin yourselves using staked ETH or wrapped staked ETH as collateral, obviously this is reliant on, or the whole protocol is reliant on this stablecoin maintaining its peg. So to increase leverage or anything like that, the stablecoin has to be sold or bought back and arbed by the market to keep the peg. So could you please explain the sort of soft and hard peg mechanisms you're going to be utilizing to try and keep the R token or the R stablecoin at around $1 or just above?
Sure. There are two different kinds of mechanisms in place that you mentioned. One, which I think is the most important mechanism, is the soft peg mechanism. And if you look at the upcoming Go stablecoin from Aave or MIM, this is basically the primary way that they keep the peg, and that is basically if somebody takes out a loan and then they exit out of the stablecoin later on when they want to, for example, in this case, they would swap R to DAI, or maybe they would swap R to staked ETH at a certain price point, let's say $0.999. They would, at a later date, would need to buy that back. So whatever sell pressure they contribute when they exit, they would have to rebuy the exact same amount of coins at the later date, which would balance out the AMM over time. This can lead to sort of shorter-term inefficiencies. What that means is that in the beginning, when you launch a stable coin, there can be excess borrowing activity where a lot of people would exit out of your stable coin, which would make it depeg below $1. And this is exactly what happened to a bunch of stable coins that have a similar model on launch. And as we can see that as time goes on, the market becomes more efficient, more people end up lending and borrowing and then exiting out of the stable coin and then buying it back at a later date. So it becomes more efficient over time. this is the primary mechanism. So it's people are incentivized if the peg is below $1, and people who are short they're more incentivized to pay it back, buy it back, and then close their loan because they can make a profit doing so. And on the other side, if the value of R is, in our case, is above $1, then it makes sense to take a loan out and then exit out of R at a price that's higher than $1, because then it will be cheaper to close the loan. And once the price goes down, you can sort of pay back the loan, and it will be you'll be making a profit doing so. So this is the primary mechanism, and in addition to this, we have a hard peg mechanism, which is via redemptions. Redemptions, they're basically it allows people who hold R, and this is a mechanism to protect people who are holders and not borrowers, to exchange it for a certain amount of value of collateral directly from the collateral that the borrowers put down. So in this situation, this is like a hard peg mechanism to the downside. What that means is that the price goes down to $1 minus the redemption fee, which in our case for staked ETH at the moment is 98.5 cents. Then people will be able to buy R for 98.5 cents or below, and then they can redeem it for the same value of collateral, sell the collateral, and then they make a profit. What this results in is extra buying pressure on R until the peg recovers to that point. And this is sort of seen as a supplementary mechanism to the main mechanism, and this allows us to diversify the holder base for R, because if you know that you can always redeem 1 R for maybe 99 cents worth of staked ETH, then you feel safe, and people are more safe holding the stablecoin that they know they can always redeem for the underlying collateral. So that's like one of the thing, but at the same time we have this convenience fee, which is like 1.5%, because this is seen as like a convenience, as a supplementary method to the primary mechanism. The primary mechanism is always the arbitrage between the what it costs to take out a loan and repay a loan, and exiting and buying back into R. So that's like the primary mechanism, and the redemption mechanism works as a supplement to that, just to sum things up.
Yeah, cool. And with the redemption mechanism, does this have to be in order of who has the most risk of liquidation, or could it be redeeming from any person that has an outstanding loan?
No, so the redemptions are actually done proportionally between all borrowers, regardless of what your collateralization ratio is. And the reason for that is that we don't want to penalize people who are taking out a heavy, like high leverage sort of loan to leverage up on their staked ETH, because they don't really pose any sort of systematic risk in our design. So we basically redeem everybody's deposits proportionally, but bear in mind that here in our design, the redemption fees are passed back onto the borrowers. So by redeeming somebody else's collateral, they're actually not worse off, because their R debt is reduced more in proportion to their collateral. So they're actually making a profit doing so. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. And also, we have a base rate mechanism that's similar to liquidities that helps with chilling effect of the redemptions. So given the fact that you have all this interest-bearing collateral, the effect on somebody redeeming like 0.something% of the entire R supply doesn't really have any material effect on your holdings. And in any case, your debt will be reduced, and you can manually sort of adjust your position, swap the R that you no longer have to repay back into staked ETH, and maintain your position that way. I think it's just like a design compromise on our side.
I think these stablecoin protocols have a lot of compromises and small details that are important to that mechanism. I think one nice thing about Raft is how they handle the staked ETH. So could you talk a little bit about the collateral type and how a user, when a user who comes in with their staked ETH, how is that staked ETH handled through the system, and how does it actually collateralize their loan?
Yeah, sure. So we actually take wrapped staked ETH deposits. So the contract holds wrapped staked ETH instead of holding the direct staked ETH rebasing token. When people come to the UI, they can choose between two different kinds of collateral, right? So they can choose between depositing staked ETH, or they can deposit wrapped staked ETH directly. Whichever they choose, we automatically wrap the coin for you if you decide to deposit staked ETH. So people don't have to, UX-wise, it's preferable because people don't have to go off to a different website. Lido's wrapping UI and then wrap it there themselves and then come back. So this sort of helps increase conversions, and we had like a pretty positive feedback from this. And then we also have the same sort of method for withdrawals as well. So if you're closing your loan and then closing your position and then redeeming, so not redeeming, you're withdrawing your existing collateral, then at that point you can choose what you want to receive. So it also helps people with the UI thing. And wrapped staked ETH is handled as an individual token. So whether this token, from our perspective and from the system's perspective, whether this coin receives yield or receives no yield makes zero difference, because it's just treated as an individual token, much like ETH, that has a price feed to it that's provided by Chainlink and Teller. And then it is just traded on that basis. So from our perspective, the fact that whether this token is interest-bearing, not interest-bearing, makes no difference. As long as it's a volatile token that's not pegged to the price of US dollar, we can use it in a sort of similar way. So, that's sort of the gist of it. And one important thing about Raft is that we actually have a multi-collateral design that's built into the smart contract. So we're able to add other forms of collateral at a later date. And we have made a governance forum post just a discussion about what sort of other collaterals people want to see. And I think soon there will be some sort of more discussion on that, more discussion about the parameters, and we potentially will branch out to different forms of staked ETH collateral as well.
That's a good anticipation that you might want to take that broader, especially maybe if Lido is losing market share or like other important players want to jump into. And I think this is why that wrapped staked ETH is a smart choice. And maybe not everybody is knowing the difference between staked ETH and wrapped staked ETH. Like if you have staked ETH, you get interest on that staked ETH by a rebase mechanism. And the wrapped staked ETH doesn't have that, but you can convert that back as if you would have gotten that yield. But the problem with the staked ETH version is that it's hard to integrate with a lot of DeFi protocols. So that's why Lido actually made the wrapped ETH version, which makes it easier for builders to work with. But what we now see, for example, I think with Rocket Pool, is that their staked version already is a wrapped staked ETH comparable. So that's, I think, one of the protocols you're probably looking at with these proposals.
Sure.
Since it's quite similar, and that's a smart design choice from your end, because then you can easily incorporate them.
Yeah, and it caters. Obviously, Lido is an undisputed leader in the field right now. If you look at the number of staked ETH outstanding, it's a top 8, top 10 coin at this point with $12 billion of market cap, which is crazy. So in terms of liquidity and everything else, it's like there's not that much compromise to be made. So that seems like for anybody that's like a no-brainer sort of choice. But there is a certain kind of user that prefers sort of like this more decentralized, egalitarian version of liquid staking, which is what Rocket Pool offers. And then there's a different audience different sort of audience that wants that. And we have had several requests from the community to add Rocket Pool ETH collateral as well. And there's other competitors coming up as well. But one thing that we have to be cautious about and have to be careful is before we add any sort of collateral on any sort of this liquid staking collateral, especially, we need to make sure that there is sufficient liquidity on Ethereum mainnet to even consider adding something like this, because there are a lot of competitors that are popping up, but until they have a proven track record of having smart contract security, enough liquidity, a chainlink price feed, all of this stuff, then they're not considered until that point. So there is obviously the opportunity for a lot of liquid staking players to come in, and then they could potentially disrupt Lido. But as a protocol, it was built in mind that we have the option to add all these other kinds of collateral. So can be prepared for whatever happens on that side. And we can also adjust, like within certain boundaries, we can adjust the protocol parameters that goes with it. So let's say, I don't know, Rocket Pool ETH becomes a market leader and like it becomes like the number one solution. At that point, we have the option to reduce the collateralization requirements because it's so capital efficient to do so. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And it makes sense. You obviously inherit the risk of any of the underlying collateral that you sort of take into the system. So it's obviously very important to keep that as safe and as curated as possible. So just shifting gears a little bit, we have seen sort of the last couple of months this sort of narrative of LSDfi summer and lots of different stablecoin or lending protocols similar, or like liquidity forks, or any of these sort of protocols launching, like Libra, or there's Prisma coming as well. So just wondering if you could elaborate on how Raft compares to these protocols and what really sets you apart, and sort of what's your USP compared to everyone else.
Right. Okay. I think like one of the main use cases that Raft caters for, which other competitors don't, is leveraging, right? So early on, we have identified that that there is an insane amount of demand for leveraging up on your staked ETH collateral or leveraging up on any sort of other assets. And what Raft does best is combining two different kind of use cases. So we combine a decentralized stablecoin, which is R, and the ability to mint that with capital efficient collateral. You can use it, you can spend it whatever way you want, and we have this stablecoin. And then we combine that stablecoin use case with the leverage use case, with a system that was natively designed for people obtaining leverage on their collateral. And we kind of fuse the two use cases together and cater for two different audiences at the same time. So one is just a normal borrower who wants to borrow R and then just want to use it for whatever purposes, right? While they, you can lock your staked ETH, you can borrow some R against it, you can exit out of it, you can spend R for your everyday expenses while your staked ETH collateral stack grows in the background, and you don't have to pay interest while this all happens. So you can take the yield up front, sort of, and then repay the loan at a later date, and you're not penalized for doing so at like sometime in the future, right? So this is the one kind of user, and the other kind of user is the leverager, like person who wants to get a bunch of leverage on their staked ETH, and there's like 2 million ETH that's currently in Aave v3 and in Maker that is sitting there for these purposes. And on Aave, people are paying like high fees to borrow ETH against staked ETH. So that's sort of that margin between the two the lending yield for staked ETH and the yield on your staked ETH and the borrow fee on your ETH used for these looping purposes. The gap is closing and the margin is becoming smaller and smaller. So that like 1 million ETH and staked ETH that's sitting there in Aave is gonna have to move eventually to like more capital efficient solutions. So that's what we offer here. And then on the other side, Maker as well, where the collateralization requirements are also much higher. It's not that capital efficient to do so. You have to pay a higher borrowing fee on your DAI than you do for R. So we basically take the stablecoin use case and then this leveraging use case, and then route everything through the R liquidity pools so that everybody benefits from it. This is like the most important thing in LSDfi, I think, like leverage. And this is what Raft was built for specifically. So this is like where we really want to stand out and offer like a very good UX for people and just a more capital efficient, cheaper way than any of the other competitors. The other thing that kind of ties in with the same sort of leveraging use case is the UX that comes with it. So we have designed Raft with this feature that's called one-step leverage in mind. So currently, if you want to go on Aave or Maker, what you have to do is you deposit staked ETH and then you borrow DAI against it, and then you swap DAI into staked ETH. You redeposit that again, you borrow DAI against that, and it's a very long, convoluted sort of transaction thing that takes a long time, and for normies it's like very hard to do so, right? So yeah, so instead of this, we just do it in a single transaction, like a flash mint base. So that makes it way simpler for people.
Yeah, so you're basically providing them with the tools to loop already, because a lot of like more greedy or degen DeFi users wouldn't be satisfied with a 5% staked ETH APR, but with that leverage, they can bump it up a little bit more. And that this means you will be providing some kind of interface for doing that and making that looping easier.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't even call it looping because it uses flash minting of R. So flash minting is basically a flash loan that's provided by the protocol. And the whole process is from the UI side, like what the user sees, you would have, you just deposit staked ETH, right? And then you can, there's like a slider there. There's like a multiplier from like 1x to like up to like 5, 6, 7, right? And then you can just pull this slider from like 1x to whatever x you want. You will see your liquidation price. You will see the total fees that you will pay. And then you can just deposit staked ETH and execute the whole thing in one transaction without seeing anything else. Like you don't have to know about how flash minting works. You don't even have to know that there is a stable coin in the background called R. All you need to know is that you're depositing staked ETH. This is your new APR. This is your new exposure. This is your leverage multiplier. And you're going to be liquidated if the price of staked ETH drops to a certain point. So it will be easier for people.
Yeah, excellent. So it sounds very similar to the MIM style UI, where you can basically just slide the slider up and see where your risk tolerance is happy to stop, I suppose. Maybe if you could just dive into the flash minting, a little bit further. So there's obviously, it can be used for liquidation and flash loans. Could you please go into a little bit more detail how you see the flash minting function used for those features as well?
Yeah, sure. So maybe just to take one step back, like what flash minting is it's basically a protocol provided flash loan that carries a small fee. So you can borrow R from the protocol, and then you can take that R and then use it for whatever purposes, as long as the R plus the fee is paid back in the same transaction. So it is a similar way to how a non-reentrant flash loan would work, right, from Balancer or some other protocol, but it's provided directly by us and why it is preferable to do so is that you can actually use this for liquidations. You don't have to source your own liquidity for liquidating any position. You can do that via flash minting, and that is an easier way of doing so. And then, as long as you sell it in the same transaction, and then you repay your loan. So that's one of the use cases. And the other use cases, like for one-step leverage specifically, and how that works is that you would deposit stake ETH, choose how much collateral you want. Then what the contract does is that it flash mints or stablecoin, swaps it back to stake ETH, and then redeposits that extra stake ETH as collateral, and then uses that position to then generate the amount of R that then you would need to repay in the form of the flash loan. So it's somewhat complicated. You can go on our website and check it out, see the exact same flow about how it works. But again, like the user wouldn't see any of this. So it would be super simple on the user side. You just like pull the slider, execute, done. You see your exact leverage multiplier that your new staking yield, your liquidation price, and it's going to be super simple for people.
Yeah, great. And obviously, all of these functions require deep liquidity for the R token. So obviously, if we have flash minting or any sort of borrowing of R and people selling or trying to get in and out of that position, it will require deep liquidity. So how are you going about guaranteeing or trying to foster deep liquidity to either maintain the peg and also maintain enough liquidity that people can flash mint or leverage up their positions?
Yeah, sure. I think like one of the most important things is just to build that initial base of liquidity, which is the number one step that we're currently working on. So Raft launched exactly 2 weeks ago today. And then our balancer pool, which is the r/DAI pool, is already the fourth largest pool on balancer. So it has like almost $40 million of TVL in that pool. And it just did like $5.5 million of volume in the last 24 hours. So there is a lot of incentives in the form of Lido tokens, Aura tokens, balancer tokens, gauges, and everything else for people to come in and provide liquidity, whether you are a user of, whether you're a borrower or you're not a borrower, you can come into that pool. You can either buy some R and provide liquidity that way, or you can mint R and then match that R with DAI, provide liquidity to that pool to gain benefit from all of these incentives that currently exist there. And I think that is the primary mechanism between driving more and more liquidity there. And what we want to do is to increase that even more over time to make sure that there is always sufficient liquidity for people to come in and out of and enter into a one-step leverage position, which obviously puts downward sell pressure on R, and then create a fluid market where people borrow and repay consistently so that it all balances out over time. And obviously redemptions works as a supplementary mechanism so that people, and also the UI serves as sort of like a warning for people not to leverage up too much so that it puts too much of a downward pressure on the price, because that is basically a basic economic mechanism that helps people understand that if they exit out of R at a price that's lower than, let's say, $9.99 or something, then $0.999, then after that, it will be more expensive for them to repay the loan because the price will go up and they have to sort of come up with the difference. So this is like a natural economic mechanism that helps incentivize, cool down the market. When the prices are above 1, it speeds up the market. So it's like it will naturally balance out over time.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I've got a follow-up question to that is, why did you choose Balancer and a Balancer pool for stablecoins over Curve or UniV3 or any of these other more volume or these other dexes, I suppose, where we see stablecoins traded in more volume rather than Balancer?
I think like we've been working with Balancer for a long time. We back in the Tempest days, we actually built a custom AMM for Balancer that let people trade, like a tokenized principal and yield position against each other through an AMM that was like a modified amplification over time, and we also adjusted like the K, the constant over time, depending on what the yield ended up to be. So we built a very efficient AMM for yield trading, and the Balancer team was very useful in doing that. And this is when we learned more about the actual Balancer tech that now also appears in UniV4. The most important of which is the vault infrastructure. So the vault infrastructure is, for those of you guys who don't know it, it basically gathers all the liquidity within a single smart contract. And why that's useful is it helps people. It helps you make a more gas efficient swap if you're swapping from, let's say in our case, you're not swapping from R to DAI, where you want to swap from R to USDC. That would be if you do it on any other DEX, it would be a two-step transaction that costs double the gas fees, obviously, because you're doing two swaps at the same time. On Balancer, it doesn't, because they all share the same liquidity pool, but there is some internal accounting about how much fees you pay. So it's already better for users who want to, even though we pair the token with DAI, it actually doesn't really make that much difference what other stablecoin we pair it with, because exiting out of just doing a swap from R to USDC or doing it from R to DAI actually costs almost the same amount of gas. So it's better for the users to do so. And the other important thing is that Balancer actually does support flash loans, while Curve doesn't. So it just provides an additional avenue for people to take R from. And I think the third reason is that Balancer's VE tokenomics coupled with Aura, it actually, the incentives can be way higher, and you get more bang for your buck, so to say, because the inflation schedule for Balancer token is more aggressive than it is for Curve. So that's there are all these various reasons, but yeah, it's that kind of sums it up.
You mentioned the central smart contract there, and we haven't really talked about the immutability of Raft, because that's, I think, one of the strengths of your design. But immutability of a contract comes often with costs, and the question always is like, what's still then the role of governance? If the contract is immutable, what's there to change around the protocol? So could you tell us a little bit about the balance between the immutability and the governance, and how do you envision governance having control over Raft?
Sure. I think I don't have a very strong view about whether immutability is better or a complete flexible system is better. I think one thing that we can be sure about is that what made DAI huge and what allowed DAI to grow and make her to take its dominant position is definitely the fact that their smart contracts are upgradable, and they could add all of these different features later on and adapt to different circumstances. At the same time, there's definitely a demand for various protocols that, like Liquidity, for example, that is completely immutable, right? So some people don't want to have any sort of trust in any multisig or on-chain governance structure, and for those people, that solution can actually make sense. From our perspective, I think we wanted to go somewhere in the middle, and this has to do with what the product does. I personally am very against hard coding any sort of oracle. So Liquidity uses Chainlink as their primary oracle. The backup one is Teller, and they kind of hard coded Chainlink as their oracle. So the entire system just hinges upon whether Chainlink will continue to work forever, which I don't think it's a smart assumption to make, even though they are the premier provider of price feeds. So just bearing this in mind, and also bearing in mind that we're actually working with collateral types, including stake ETH, which are derivatives. They're not a native asset of the chain, and it's a design compromise because we have to be comfortable with the fact that something can go wrong on the smart contract side and whatnot. There can be a big change in terms of how much liquidity is in there, and on Ethereum in general. And then we have to be able to react to these changing market circumstances. So what we have designed in terms of government in mind is that we have a sort of governance minimized approach. What that means is the core parts of the protocol are immutable. The mechanisms, the stablecoin, everything else, it doesn't actually change, but all the other things we can, including things like the borrowing fees, the redemption spread, the rewards that the liquidators get, the rewards that the redistributors get, the flash mint fees, adding additional collateral types, these can actually be changed. And the reason for this is again, just scaling in mind and the ability to react to different market circumstances while keeping the key parts of the protocol immutable. And then we actually give governance, future governance, like an actual use case where they have to choose these parameters or at least delegate their token voting power to somebody else to take this decision for them and be able to react to different circumstances. So I think immutability is a double-edged sword, and I think whether somebody should go fully immutable or not fully immutable depends on the integrations they have, the nature of the product, the liquidity, and everything else. And I think if you want to offer a competitive product with competitive parameters, then non-immutability is definitely the way to go. So you can actually tweak your parameters as time goes on, and then just react to different market circumstances.
Yeah, and it shows that crypto projects need to make sure that there's a balance between some ideology of being decentralized versus just being practical. Like, can the people who have knowledge of the protocol or can actually work with the protocol make changes because the market will always be changing. So sometimes it's not just decentralization. Sometimes it's you have to make design choices. You need to have different fallback mechanisms, which can change over time. Like the ecosystem is something that changes very fast, so you need to be prepared for that in the future too. And something set in stone might not be the way to go. Although I think it's actually something insane what Liquidity did, and actually that it's still working shows they made some good choices there. So kudos for that team too. But there are some lessons to be learned from that, and it's good you made your own decisions, like how you want to do that with governance. And I think on another topic of like decentralization of your protocol, there's always some kind of critique of basically project just hosting their own interfaces, just doing that on AWS. But I think there has been a good trend of projects actually hosting out on IPFS to be more decentralized. Is that something you do to with your front end, or are you incentivizing the community to build their own front ends for interaction with the Raft protocol?
Yes, yeah, definitely. There is no smart contract provided way for us to incentivize front ends, because that approach is didn't really, based on the what we've seen, didn't really lead to a lot of results from other protocol side. But we will have some sort of once we have a native token, it will be easier for us to incentivize people, put together actual referral programs that help drive TVL, and then people will decide to build their own front ends on that basis. But that being said, we are in talks with several people and several teams. There are large projects that are interested in building their own front end, and they have actually made a start. So once we have something to announce, there, we'll definitely announce.
Awesome. Well, speaking of announcements, I suppose everyone's interested to hear how they can get involved. So is there any alpha you may be able to drop on future governance token and potential utilities, or any other mechanisms that it may be incorporating?
Yeah, definitely. So Raft will have its own token that is already being announced in a decentralization plan that we put together. And I think token governance will definitely be one of the earliest use cases for the token. So I would recommend that people do get involved in the community, get involved with the forum, use the protocol, try it out, see for yourself, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then getting involved early, obviously, would be great for everybody who are trying to grow the community from the start. And then there are a lot of technical discussions in our forum as well about adding additional types of collateral, thinking about the different protocol parameters going forward. And then we're also looking to hear from different front-end operators and people who are building their own liquid staking solutions or want some sort of other collateral added. So yeah, that's a lot of things, but yeah, try to get involved, guys.
Awesome. That's a good shout to potential community members or current community members to get active. I think that's one of the great things about new starting protocols. You can get involved. The structures aren't that complex, so it's easy to jump in. But actually, if you are quite involved, you can actually have a good impact, and you can actually produce something, or your voice is at least heard in these discussions. So yeah, a good shout to jump in these the Twitter and on Telegram or Discord, and I think that leads also to a final question of what are you building towards? Of course, we talked about more collateralization types, hosting different front ends by external parties. But is there anything we missed that might excite listeners that you are discussing or building right now for Raft?
So Raft is currently an LSDfi protocol, right? So what we focus on is various types of capital efficient staked ETH collateral, starting with staked ETH and then potentially branching out to different types. But what the protocol was built in mind is not only to cater to these staking derivatives, but also cater to any type of other collateral. So what Raft can be used for actually is through our one-step leverage design, is it can be used as a general leverage engine, spot leverage on any sort of volatile asset. So people who want to leverage up on WBTC, if we actually want to add WBTC collateral at a later date, they can actually do so through our system, and it will work very fluently together with other types of collateral. So whether that is an ETH staking derivative or it is some other type of collateral that has enough liquidity on mainnet, so we can actually implement that and then see which way the protocol goes, because we don't want to stop at taking two different kinds of staked ETH collateral, but we also want to branch out potentially into different types in the future. And I think this will be something for the community to decide whether Raft should stay as an LSDfi native, staking priority sort of protocol, or do we want to actually use this design that we put together and then create a leverage engine for any sort of volatile asset. So I think that will be something for the community to decide in the upcoming weeks, upcoming months. Yeah.
That's kind of huge, I think, for a community to discuss and decide on that. But I think it's good that you're that flexible and actually have the tech in place already. So a good topic to explore because that will add a lot of flexibility for users. I think we discussed everything around Raft, and the LSDfi space is a hot space. So it's a smart move to start your project there and build from there. And the huge TVL growth in the last few weeks is definitely a good piece of evidence for that you're building something nice. We talked about governance before, or an involved community, but if people got excited listening to you about Raft, where can they find you? What's the easiest way to connect to Raft?
Yeah, sure. I think Discord we have a very active community that are very engaged in Discord, and actually there is some high quality discussion about collateral types, protocol parameters, and everything else in there. And we have different roles for people who are minters, holders, everything else. It's a good place to get started, get involved. We also have a Telegram announcements channel and a Telegram discussion channel that you can find on the website. Obviously, the website is a good place to go to get an idea for what Raft does. We have all the pools there. We have all the stats there. That is for everybody to see, and it's easy to digest. And people who want to do a deeper dive, they can actually go on our docs, which are probably the most comprehensive docs of any comparable protocol out there, with a detailed explanation for every single thing that Raft can do, but done so in a more, I would say, easily digestible way. And Twitter is, of course, the #1 place where people can, where you guys can keep up to date with what's going on, the latest developments. And then for those who want to do more technical discussions, go check out forum.raft.fi, where we have some very technical discussions about protocol parameters, different collateral types, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, David, for coming on the DaySXDAO podcast. I enjoyed this conversation. We initiated the chats with you guys because we want to know more about the LSDfi space, and hopefully the listeners also had an informative listen to this episode. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks very much for having me. See you guys.
See you.
Thanks for tuning in to the DaySXDAO podcast, a place where some of the most progressive and innovative builders, thought leaders, and traders in the crypto space come together to discuss all areas of the crypto industry. Whether you're into DeFi, Layer 1s, Layer 2s, NFTs, or anything in between, we've got you covered. And as a reminder, nothing said on this podcast should be construed as financial advice or as a solicitation to buy or sell any digital asset or security. The comments, views, and opinions expressed by the hosts or guests on the podcast are their own. As always, you'll need to do your own research.